Welcome to Densho's 2023 virtual fundraiser, Our Voices Will Not Be Silenced. We're excited to share some powerful art, conversation, and community building tonight. But before we dig in, we want to open tonight's program with a special musical guest.
Yeah, born in Japan and raised in Seattle, Washington, Tomo Nakayama is an artist whose melodic, complex, and emotionally compelling music has been praised by NPR, KXP, and the New York Times. Tomo, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Brady. It's an honor to be here today. Thanks so much. This first song is called Hidakamura. It's about a small mountain village in Shikoku, where I was born. Meet me in the country house, where the mountains open up and the sun will hang so high above. In the town I love, nestled in the morning fog, in translucent paper walls, on the hills where persimmons grow and fall, when I come to call. When I'm tired of trying to hold my place in line, when I lose myself between two worlds, I find that I think of you, and I know it's true, 'cause where I belong, only in the quiet hours of the land where I was born. All my memories always linger on in my mother's arms, in my mother's arms. Ooh. Thank you so much. The second song is it's called Pieces of Sky. Earth is big and the seas are blue. There's so much that I want to show you. Evening falls on a clear white moon. I can't wait till the daylight holds you. Lately seems like the world's on fire. Lately it feels like the truth don't matter. All I care about's the kind of place we might sons and daughters. Will I feel turned around when the pieces of sky are falling down? What will I leave to be found by your eyes, by your eyes? Oh, Earth is big and the seas are big. Icebergs crumble into the water. Nature's older than me or you. Shall outlive all our foolishness? Will I feel turned around when the pieces of sky are falling down? What will I leave in the ground when I die? When I die, will I feel changed around when the pieces of sky come raining down? When I leave, could I say that I tried, that I tried?
Wow, what an incredible way to kick off the night. Thank you so much, Tomo. What a beautiful performance. Now, I'm Brady Wakayama, and I'm a reporter for King 5 News in Seattle and a proud member of the Asian American Journalists Association.
And I'm Erin Shigaki. I was one of Densho's very first artist in residence back in 2018, and I've spent the past year as Densho's inaugural community curator, exploring how other artists are telling different aspects of the Japanese American story in their work.
And we'll be your co-hosts tonight, and we're coming to you live from the Kirkland Performance Center just outside of Seattle. As Yonsei descendants of Minadoka, it means a lot to be here supporting an org dedicated to preserving Japanese American history and uplifting the stories and voices of our community.
Yes, Brady, I am incredibly grateful to Densho for supporting my growth as an artist and creating space for me to more deeply explore how the Japanese American incarceration affected my family and my community. The more I learn about those connections between past and present, the more I feel called to make sure this history is not erased.
Yeah, Erin and I are both storytellers in our own ways, but as we stand here tonight, our ability to tell those stories, to tell the truth about our history, is coming under threat. One of our featured speakers tonight, author Maggie Tokuda-Hall, experienced this firsthand when Scholastic tried to censor words like racism from the children's book she wrote about her grandparents' World War II incarceration. You'll be hearing from Maggie later tonight about how she clapped back and what we can learn from her experience. But we now know that this isn't a one-time, one-off incident. This backlash to our truth speaking is happening across the country.
Yes, we also saw this when Julie Otsuka's novel about the incarceration When the Emperor Was Divine was banned from Wisconsin's Muskego, Norway school district last year. And unfortunately, this is something I've personally experienced in my work as a public artist. When I installed a mural at Bellevue College in honor of the 2020 Day of Remembrance, an administrator literally erased a line from my artist statement describing the decades of anti-Asian racism that preceded Executive Order 9066. And it was this community, including my friends here at Densho, who stood with me through that ordeal, who raised their voices alongside mine to demand that our story be told in its entirety. I'm here tonight as a proud partner and supporter of Densho's critical work to preserve and share the stories of our Nikkei ancestors while providing future generations with the tools and resources to honor and uplift their experiences in our own unique ways. If you find yourself feeling inspired by tonight's program, I encourage you to learn more about Densho and find ways to give back to the intergenerational project of knowing and sharing our own stories.
As we spend this evening together, we hope to embody Densho's commitment to pass on to the next generation by keeping the history of World War II incarceration and broader JA history alive through our partnerships with artists, scholars, authors, and storytellers, just like those joining us on the stage tonight. You can make a donation anytime tonight by scanning the QR code on your screen, texting the number on your screen, or scrolling down below this video. And again, thank you all for your generous contributions and support of Densho.
Before we get deeper into our program, we want to pause for a moment to name that we're on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. Invite those of you watching to learn on whose land you reside if you don't already know. Our own community's story of forced removal and incarceration exists within a much longer history of the dispossession and displacement of Indigenous peoples from their ancestral homes. So as we push back against attempts to silence our voices, let us also join the chorus of Indigenous voices who have been calling for justice and healing for generations.
Yeah, thanks, Erin, for that reminder of the histories we're bringing into this space. Now, we're going to bring someone very special to the stage to share a little more about how Densho is working to lift up these stories. Please join us in welcoming Densho's Executive Director, Naomi Ostwald Kawamura. She came to Densho a year ago after working in museums and education for over 2 decades, and she's gracefully led Densho through a critical year of transition.
Thank you so much, Erin and Brady. Good evening, everyone. Stories in all their forms are the threads that weave together individuals, families, and communities. Stories have also allowed us at Densho to build community, transcending generations and time. Fundamentally, the message we hope to impart through our work is one of connection. We connect the past to the present and ensure that the experiences of those who lived through the wartime incarceration are not forgotten. We also work to ensure that this history and these stories connect with the widest of audiences to then spark further dialogue and reflection. Through these stories and connections, I believe that we find our shared humanity. I've just celebrated my first year as the new executive director of Densho. The year has been tremendously rewarding, though it's been both what feels like a marathon and a sprint. Throughout the year, though, I've been truly appreciative of Tom Maeda for his continued mentorship and to the Densho staff and board for supporting me along the way. Looking ahead, I want to be deliberate about this next chapter for Densho and invest specifically in our educational outreach work and in our technology. We'll be thinking about strategic partnerships and the development of programming to make Densho's resources more readily accessible to educators and to students in the K-12 space. We'll also be exploring other opportunities that technology enables. That means thinking about our long-term preservation strategies and how Densho will respond to ever-evolving technology like generative AI. We'll be unfolding more technologists to support Densho through a newly formed advisory group to be launched later this year. And Densho will continue to lead in the space bridging technology with art, culture, and history. I'm also acutely aware of the unique cultural moment we find ourselves in. I recognize how the next few years will be so crucial when living survivors of the incarceration are still with us. We have a limited window to continue to collect, preserve, and steward their lived experience and honor their legacy. And this coincides with a moment when our ability to speak the truth is increasingly coming under attack. I'm grateful to bold leaders like Maggie Tokuda-Hall and Erin Shigaki, who are unapologetically sharing their stories while challenging recent attempts to erase and sanitize the incarceration history. Densho is committed to standing in solidarity with our community and our partners to continue our collective calls for justice and equity. The challenges and opportunities we have before us demand a multi-generational effort, and so we will need to continue looking forward and engage successive generations into becoming stewards of these memories. I'm excited to put my energies into how we will bring younger generations into this critical work and create meaningful opportunities for young people to not only connect with survivors and hear their stories, but feel inspired to lead and become more involved in organizations like Densho. Tonight, I hope you get a sense of all that we do at Densho and ask you to consider the importance of our work and the role you can play in supporting that work. Whether it's the oral histories with our elders who experienced the wartime incarceration firsthand, the hundreds of thousands of photos and documents in our digital archives, or educational content and work with artists and activists to share this history with the world, the Densho team is always hard at work to keep our stories alive and accessible. Tonight kicks off our end-of-year fundraising, and every contribution, no matter the size, helps us continue our vital work of preserving stories and educating future generations about the injustices of the past. I hope you'll consider making a donation to Densho this evening. Your generosity will help us to continue our mission of preserving history, fostering understanding, and build a more inclusive and just future for all. As I've been a bit under the weather, just recovering from COVID, I want to apologize for a change of programming tonight. I intended to be in conversation with our guest, Maggie Tokuda-Hall, who will join us on stage later this evening. A very special thanks to Karen Maeda Allman for holding that conversation with Maggie tonight instead. It is through the work of writers like Maggie and educators, journalists, historians, and storytellers that we continue to shine a light on history's darkest moments, ensuring they are not forgotten. And Densho will continue to play a role as a memory keeper of the rich stories and experiences that the community has shared with us. This remembrance work has not only brought people together, we also believe that it is restorative, helps to build a resiliency that will enable the next generation to look forward into the future with hope. I thank you for joining us this evening and for being a part of the Densho community. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and congratulations on killing it during your first year at the helm of Densho. I love that emphasis on the intergenerational task of keeping these stories alive and how each of us has an important role to play in that work. This next segment is from a special reading that Densho hosted earlier this year. Traci Kato-Kiriyama is an incredible writer, performer, and community organizer, and they wrote this poem about their grandfather's resistance to World War II incarceration. The poem is inspired by a photo of Traci's grandfather taken at Manzanar, and they actually had to improvise a reenactment of that photo on the fly when it turned out to be missing from the event slide deck. We'll let Traci take it from here, but just know that you're about to witness their performance chops on full display.
Oh, I have a slide. Oh, wait, do I not? Oh, it's okay. It's okay. No worries. Imagine this. Okay. A black and white photo. Kato family in Manzanar, an American concentration camp during World War II. Uncle Roy, little Uncle Roy on the right-hand side, holding a rifle, wearing some military costume. Bizarre. Auntie Aiko, born in camp, little Chibi, sort of in front of my grandpa Kato, long black beard. Grandma Shizuko in the back. Dead center in the front, my mom. Little 3-year-old, I think at the time. Thick glasses. Holding a white baby doll. Blonde hair. And she looks so pissed. Like it's the most mad, mean face you could ever imagine on a child or a person, period. It's the best photo of her ever. Okay? Is it better than that? Okay. It's a wild photo. I'll share it with you somehow someday. So that leads me to what probably I can do 2 poems. I realize there's so much about my grandfather that motivates who I am as a person and an organizer and an artist. And so this one is called No Redress. It is dedicated to all ancestors who died before knowing that redress and reparations would be a thing to come or to be fought in for the future we call now. No museum, no monument, No poem, no song can house the spirit of a past soul like that of my grandfather, who died before justice could meet the old man at his mailbox. Grandpa never got to stand in line at the bank, 3 inches taller, with redress check in hand, 1 foot in front of the other, feeling grounded again. Never got to deposit an apology in his savings account. Never got to wonder of how he might spend this money, on new equipment for the nursery, or a truck for himself, or college money for his grandchildren, or for once take the most takai cuts from the fish truck man. Most years in April, I attend pilgrimage. I say hello, Manzanar. I bow at the graves. I speak to the wind of my hopes for afterlife to be a real thing. Not so I can see Grandpa again, but for him to look around today, jump into the circle, dance the tankobushi and watch me get it right, and see our friends, all our relations, learn what we mean by chosen family. We are here, not only to remember, but to remind the local docents this place will never be a museum. This body will never forget. And we leave pilgrimage with pledges as concrete as the monument. We sing songs to keep each other awake on the long ride home. We lose sight quickly, rearview mirrors, a pitch black sky, where they close the gate at the hour they have had enough of us, where we leave behind parts of our best poetry, where I hope not, but think Grandpa sits still, waiting.
See, what did we tell you? So good. Here's that photo of Traci's grandfather on the screen, so you can see the image that inspired Traci's brilliance. This is just such a powerful testament to why these stories still matter and why it's important for us Yansei and even the Gosei and Rokusei coming up now to keep telling these stories.
You know, I'm really struck by how Traci is doing the work of keeping their grandfather's story alive and refusing to let his voice be silenced. As someone who also thinks a lot about these intergenerational connections in their work and how we're still navigating the impacts of the camps all these years later, it's really inspiring to hear these stories of resistance that others have tried to erase. And that spirit of resistance is alive and well. I see it in Traci's work. I see it in the Minidoka community rising up to protect our historic site from desecration. I see it in my work with Tsuru for Solidarity, fighting for reparations for Black communities and an end to the detention of immigrant children and families today. And I see it clearly in Maggie Tokuda-Hall's refusal to be silenced by publishers who wanted a whitewashed version of her grandparents' incarceration story. Now we're going to turn to that conversation and let Maggie tell you about it herself.
Yeah, there's been a slight shift in this part of the program. Now, we had originally planned to have Maggie in conversation with Naomi, moderated by Karen Maeda Allman, who many in Seattle know as a beloved community member and bookseller from Elliott Bay Books. But as Naomi mentioned earlier, she's thankfully COVID-free now, but still recovering. So Maggie and Karen will be joining us without Naomi.
Yes, I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you, Naomi, for rallying to deliver that powerful address earlier and for all that you do for Densho. Now let's give a warm welcome to Maggie Tokuda-Hall and Karen Maeda Allman.
Hello, I'm Karen Maeda Allman. I'm a longtime supporter of Densho, and I've been involved in bookselling for over 30 years. I grew up reading to and alongside my Japanese mother and American father. Books like the one Maggie Tokuda-Hall has written didn't exist back then. I've watched with joy and awe as talented Japanese-American writers have come forward and published books which help readers young and old learn more about the incarceration and its aftermath. Author Maggie Tokuda-Hall has an MFA in creative writing from the University of San Francisco. Her books include the 2017 Parents' Choice Gold Medal winning picture book, Also an Octopus, illustrated by Benji Davies, Her young adult novel, The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, an NPR, Kirkus School Library Journal, and Book Page Best Book of 2020, and its sequel, The Siren, the Song, and the Spy, published just last week. But she's with us this evening to speak about her picture book, Love in the Library, illustrated by Yas Imamura and published by Candlewick Press. Love in the Library was named a Best Picture Book of 2022 by Book Page, School Library Journal, Booklist, and Publishers Weekly. Maggie, could you tell us a little bit about the book and why you wanted to tell this particular story?
Sure. Firstly, thank you to Densho so much for asking me to be here today. I'm really honored. And Love in the Library is the true story of my grandparents, Tama and George, who met in Minidoka during World War II. Tama was the camp librarian in Minidoka, and every day George would go in and check out huge stacks of books. He had zero intention of reading so that he could go flirt with her. And it's my favorite family story. It's one I've known for my whole life. And I had never considered making it into a children's book or in any way trying to claim any sort of ownership of it until 2017 when President Trump took office, and it became clear when his very first act in office was to try to pass the Muslim ban or travel ban. And it was clear to me that he was going to be using his time to just put forward the most cruel and white supremacist agenda that he possibly could. And so I did all the things I knew I needed to do, like I called my Congress people and I wrote my angry postcards and I did all the protest things. But I also really tried to audit what I might have to offer in this situation that was unique, that might be something no one else had. And I realized I had this beautiful story in my own family about the incredible cruelty of these kinds of policies, but also about the incredible resilience of the people who they target. And so that's how Love in the Library originally came about.
I understand that you bring this beautiful book into schools. Can you tell us how Densho has been a helpful resource for you in helping children connect to this history?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I wrote Love in the Library, I didn't do a lot of research because it was a story that I have heard since before I can remember. It's a story I know like the back of my hand. But I knew when it became a real book, I was going to go into schools and I needed to become an expert in the incarceration and be able to speak to it really fluently and to be able to answer questions that, you know, a lot of the things that are kind of given in this book pose a lot of questions for small children. And so Densho's been an incredible resource for me. So when I was preparing the school presentation that I give, and I was looking through photos to try to find pictures of Minidoka and of my grandparents even, and I was able to use Densho to do that. And beyond that, when I give the presentations, I always like to make sure that the kids and the teachers know that this conversation doesn't need to stop with this book, that their curiosity doesn't need to stop with this book, and that there are a lot of really wonderful resources available to them, like other books, but also like Densho, which is available online, and that is such an incredible resource. And so that's something I mention at every school visit I do.
It's great to hear about how valuable Densho resources have been. That really fits into their core mission and growing interest in creating more educational resources for younger audiences, and all these resources are free. This book was very well received, your book, and attracted a wide readership and many positive reviews, and it was nominated for many honors. And this is one of the reasons why Scholastic, which has direct relationships with over 90% of U.S. schools, public and private, approached your publisher about producing a new Scholastic edition of your book. So what happened next?
Yeah, so one day I got an email that was really exciting, which was that Scholastic had reached out to Candlewick, who published this book in 2022, and they wanted to make a Scholastic edition of it to be part of a particular featured display that they were doing of AAPI stories. But there was one caveat, which was if they were going to offer me this licensing deal, I needed to make some edits to my book. And I opened up the PDF of what their proposed edits were, and it was only in my author's note. And they had excised an entire paragraph that talks about how what had happened to my grandparents was not a unique experience, that in fact, this history of mass incarceration and white supremacist policies is one that is a defining characteristic of American history. And beyond that, they had also deleted the word racism both times that it appeared in the author's note. And it was when I was looking at those red lines, when I realized they wouldn't even let me say the word racism in talking about what had happened during the incarceration, that I knew there was absolutely no compromise to be had. There was no way to tell this story without calling it what it is, which was state-sanctioned racism. And so I was really furious because it was an incredible opportunity. Scholastic has such reach, and they go directly into classrooms. And I wrote this book to be used in classrooms. I imagined it as being part of the curriculum, the kind of thing that could open up conversations and avenues of study into this period of time. And so, I was really torn for a moment because I wanted so badly to accept this incredible deal, but the price was so high, and beyond being a high price, it was such an offensive and specific edit. And it was clear from the letter that they had sent me that they were doing it because they were concerned about the rising culture of book bans, and they were worried that the language I had used in my author's note was a little too incendiary and might turn some of their market off, and so they were worried about any kind of limit to their sales that might happen because of the kind of language I had used. And so I decided to say no, but beyond that, I decided to say no publicly and to make the letter that I sent back to them public and open, because I suspected that I was not the first marginalized author that they had asked to make this kind of compromise. And I really hoped that it might just create an environment where other authors of color, other authors with marginalized identities, would feel a little bit empowered to mention to their editors or to their agents that they were given edits that they weren't comfortable with. Because the edit that they asked for was trying to hold this kind of like impossible center of, we want to honor these sort of diverse stories, these stories that highlight people of color and their experiences in this country, at the same time as appeasing the very same people who are uninterested in hearing those stories, and beyond that, banning these kinds of stories wholesale. It wasn't going to matter that I had used a small amount of language that might rub one person the wrong way. It was already, the source was already going to be the problem. So I was sort of shocked, and I wanted to make a stand that this was not something that I accepted, and beyond that, it was not something that I felt other authors of color needed to accept. And so it sounds sort of trite now. It's like I wrote it up on my blog, I tweeted about it. But that was the venue that I figured was most appropriate, because I kind of figured it was an intra-community discussion within children's literature about how we talk about history. But it became a lot larger than that really quickly, and a lot of educators became involved really quickly. And it became clear that people suspected that something like this was going on, and a lot of people really rejected that entire premise. And I was so pleased to not stand alone in that moment, because I realized I was standing on the shoulders of so many educators and activists who've already been doing this kind of work for so long, to ensure that when we tell the story of our past, when we tell the story of our nation, especially when we tell it to children, we tell it in its fullness and in honesty. And so I said no. I still have said no to them. So I am really pleased that Candlewick has been so supportive throughout this process, but it is not a Scholastic licensed book.
Wow, that is so chilling that book bans are encouraging publishers to ask their writers to censor books. And it's mind-boggling. And I think that, here we're in Banned Book Week and Books Week, and there are ever more book bans happening. And so I think it's really important and timely that we're talking about it today. Can you tell us, you told us a little bit about educators' responses. Could you tell us about some of the other responses that you've received?
Yeah. Before I do, I just want to be really clear that Love in the Library hasn't been banned. It was a case where the publisher was trying to preemptively censor, and that these bans disproportionately affect Black people, and LGBTQ plus stories, and particularly where those identities intersect. And I think one of the reasons that there was so much response to my particular story is that I am not a Black person and I am a cisgender woman. And there were a lot of things about my package that made it more appealing as a story to tell, rather than the kinds of authors who really do face these bans constantly and whose identities are being attacked much more violently and with much more concerted effort. There was a large backlash because of the amount of attention that it got. And so Scholastic did recant, and they said, we would love to license your book without any of the proposed edits. And I had a meeting with them and their CEO, who's Peter Warwick, and the president of their education division, which is the division that had made me the offer. And in that meeting, I really wanted to go in with the goal of restorative justice. I wasn't interested in getting a better deal for myself. I wasn't interested in punishing them or making them ashamed. I really was just concerned with making sure that they did better by my community, which is the community of marginalized authors at large in the United States, because I understood that I was being given this really unique opportunity by dint of luck and just happening to be the person who said this one thing this one time. This is something that a lot of authors are facing. And my goals for that meeting were to get an honest recounting of what had happened and to ask them what they intended to do to make sure that this never happened to another marginalized author again. But most importantly, from my perspective, was what did they plan to do to combat book bans? Scholastic is $1 billion company. They have incredible resources. And book bans often target their books. The book Melissa by Alex Gino is one of the most banned books in the country because it was one of the first middle grade novels to have a transgender protagonist. That's a Scholastic book. They have a vested interest in fighting this. But in the course of that meeting, it became really clear that they were unable to answer what had happened. They didn't let the editor who had made the offer in the room, which I actually do understand. They didn't know what kind of personality I have and if maybe I was going to be the kind of person who would yell or be abusive. Like, I could see why they would do that to protect their own employee. But I was surprised that nobody who was in the meeting was able to answer it. The best answer they could give me was that someone had a bad day at work, which was not an answer I accepted because it was clearly one that was made from a place of expertise, where they said, well, we like this book, but we're worried this message is going to interfere with its saleability. That's not a oopsies. That's an evaluation that comes from somebody who understands their industry and also understands the priorities of the company that they work for. I asked them what they were going to do to make sure that this never happened again. And they said they were going to hire outside auditors to kind of come into the company and see what had happened and see how they could make sure it never happened again, which on its face sounds like a really satisfying answer. The idea of going outside of the company is, of course, a good idea. But it is also the same answer that they gave about 14 years earlier when their book club division got busted by Lauren Miracle for making the same kind of offer. They said they would love to carry her middle grade novel if she took the gay uncles out of it. She said no. She said no publicly. There was a big backlash. It's a familiar story, you might notice. It sounds very similar. And that was the answer they gave at that time, was we're going to hire outside auditors and we're going to make sure that this never happens again. Obviously, that wasn't sufficient, and so I did not accept that aspect of their answer. And lastly, when I asked them, what are you doing to combat book bans? Because they were all like, oh yeah, we agree, book bans bad. Book bans are very bad. And I was like, okay, well, what are you doing? What do you provide in this? And they said, well, we provide annotations. And I asked, what does that mean? And it basically, to them, is the good press that a book gets. Like if Kirkus gives it a good review or NPR says it's a good book. And for context, that's the kind of information that is available for free on the author's website, because we're all monsters who collect every good review that's ever been said about us. And also on the Amazon page. This is not the resource of $1 billion company. This is free information. And so none of their answers were acceptable because none of them made it clear how they were going to protect other authors of marginalized backgrounds from this kind of treatment. And so the goal of restorative justice was shot, and I had to say no.
So I have to say that when I was growing up, and for many years into my book-selling career, there weren't many books like the one that you've written, and there weren't books like Melissa. But now that's changed. Books like Love in the Library can really help open up conversations, encouraging children and adults to talk with each other, to ask questions, and to find out more. So as we close, a lot of what you've talked about tonight has had to do with restorative justice. What would restorative justice look like for you in this context?
Within the context of the history of Japanese incarceration, to me, it is not the reparations that were paid during the 80s, which I understand were really hard fought for by activists, and I do not mean to belittle their incredible work. But while those reparations were being paid, the Reagan administration had their backs turned to an entire demographic of people who were dying in the hundreds of thousands because they refused to put any government funding to understand what was going wrong, because it was a disease that primarily targeted gay men, and Reagan did not care about gay men. So the injustice persisted. To me, what it looks like in this situation is the cessation of mass incarceration. It's making sure that when we talk about what our families went through, the grave injustice of having our homes taken away and our lives stopped and being put into prison, that doesn't stay like as a little time capsule, as something that is unique in American history. This is such a broad history. Minidoka itself is on unceded Shoshone land. This forced removal is not something that is specific to us. Mass incarceration is not something that is specific to us. And so it is not accepting symbolic apologies anymore. I think we are past the point where that is acceptable.
Thank you, Maggie. Your work and your insights, and also the work of organizations like Densho, give me hope for the future. We have so much to learn from Maggie, her generation, and those to come. Maggie's work also shows respect for those who came before her, including her grandmother Tama, her uncle Kip, and her mother, Wendy Tokuda. They were all fierce advocates for justice for those in our community, Japanese Americans, and all others suffering from racism and other forms of oppression. We remember and we act.
Well, thank you, Maggie and Karen, for such an insightful conversation. It was so inspiring to hear more about Maggie's response and her advocacy. The world needs more Maggies lifting up our stories so we can learn from our past. And it gives me so much hope for our future knowing that Densho is providing the tools to empower voices like Maggie's. As Karen put it, we can't just remember, we need to act too. I'm now joined on the stage by Densho Board Vice Chair Nick Oki. Upon graduating from Georgetown University, Nick began working as a software engineer in Washington, D.C. In 2019, he moved back home to Seattle, and we were excited to have him join the Densho board to help represent the perspective of the younger generations of Japanese Americans. Nick is a proud Yonsei, and his Nisei grandparents, Kimmy and Bob Oki, were incarcerated at Minidoka during the war.
Thanks, Brady. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. It's my honor to be able to continue my family's legacy leading Densho through my role on the board of directors and as the chair of the board's new development committee. Like Erin, Brady, and Maggie, my family was incarcerated at Minidoka, and Densho's work is very personal. My grandparents seldom spoke about their experience in camp, but I'll never forget the stories they've told me. From my grandfather being removed from the University of Washington in the middle of his freshman year, to friends pooling their flour rations in order to bake a cake for my grandparents' in-camp wedding in July of 1943. My grandfather's no longer with us to recount these memories, but I can always revisit Densho's record of his oral history to see his wiry mustache bounce as he tells his story in his own proud voice. Preserving history isn't easy work. It requires intentional stewardship generation after generation, and I'm inspired, especially tonight, to witness the next generation of Japanese Americans so passionate about this cause. Densho plays an enormous role in both keeping this history and empowering others to use the lessons it offers as a tool for combating injustice and violations of civil liberties. As Development Committee Chair, I'm calling on our networks to ensure that Densho has the resources we need to continue doing what we do best. Remember that every donation matters. As a community-driven nonprofit, our annual budget relies on the generous contributions of individual donors. Please consider giving this evening as we kick off Densho's end-of-year fundraising campaign. Our goal is to raise $1 million by the close of 2023 to ensure the ongoing success of Densho into 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, and if you've already given, thank you. And if you have yet to make a donation, please do so now by scanning the QR code on your screen, texting the number on your screen, or scrolling down below this video. If you are making your contribution in honor of a loved one, please add a personal note as you submit your donation.
We hope the performances, stories, and calls to action you saw here tonight are all testaments to the impact of Densho's archival, public history, and educational programs. On behalf of the Densho board, thank you to all of our donors, sponsors, and partners. We also want to express our heartfelt gratitude and respect for the many contributions from our elders. Whether they have courageously shared their stories with us as a narrator in our oral history program, shared their priceless family photos and documents with us, or generously contributed to Densho as part of our planned giving program, thank you for making Densho part of your personal legacy.
Well, thank you, Nick, for inviting all of us to do our part, and thank you to everyone who has already contributed. For me, I really think of Densho as stewards of our community's collective memories. There's something really reassuring in knowing that these stories have been preserved and will still be here for the generations that come after us. This next segment carries forward that spirit of collective remembrance. Densho asked community members to share photos of the Nikkei ancestors who are no longer with us, but whose memories continue to inspire us. There are some really wonderful tributes in here, including one for my own grandfather. So please join me as we take a moment to honor these beloved ancestors.
When I think that I'm all alone, when I feel like there's nowhere to go, she's by my side, there to remind me I'm walking for two. When the weight is heavy and cold, when I feel my legs turning to stone, she calls my name, always to find me, I'm walking for two. Walking for too many years, I've been hiding behind all the reasons to quit. If you can't change for yourself, then you damn well better do it for someone you love. Now I know that I've got a home. Now I know I'm never alone. She's by my side, long as she's with me, I'm walking for two. She's by my side, there to remind me I'm walking for two. I'm walking for two. I'm walking for two.
That was so touching to see all those moms and dads and beloved bachans and jichans up there. I'm not gonna lie, Brady, I'm pretty emotional. I think it's really beautiful how Densho honors those who have passed and provides a platform for all of us to share memories as a community. Now we're approaching the end of our program. All of you joining us from home have been so generous with your time and your support for Densho, and we just want to give a huge thank you to each and every one of you.
Yeah, that's right, Erin. What a beautiful way to honor our loved ones. Thank you to everyone who shared a piece of their legacy with us tonight. And thank you again to everyone who has made a donation to Densho as part of this year's virtual fundraiser. We see you and we appreciate you. Every single contribution that came in tonight is a reminder of the importance of this work and will make a meaningful difference as Densho launches their end-of-year fundraising campaign.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our program. It's been such an honor to spend the evening lifting up these powerful stories and hearing how Densho and folks like Maggie are keeping our history alive for future generations. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We also want to give a shout out to the generous sponsors of tonight's event. Oki Foundation, 6th Street, Atsuhiko and Aina Goodwin Tateuchi Foundation, Island Insurance Foundation, MJ Takisaki Inc., Inatai Foundation, John Y. and Reiko E. Sato Foundation, Servco Pacific, Ohashi Landscaping, Gobo Enterprises LLC, Goldman Sachs, Port of Seattle, Nitsa Stegen, Cadence Real Estate, and the Mayflower Park Hotel.
Yeah, and thanks also to our hosts and crew at the Kirkland Performance Center and our presenters, Tomo Nakayama, Traci Kato-Kiriyama, Maggie Tokuda-Hall, Karen, Maeda, Allman, and Nick Oki, and all the Densho staff members who worked behind the scenes to make this event possible.
And thanks again to everyone who tuned in tonight. We'll say our goodbyes here and leave you with more music from the amazing Tomo Nakayama. Thank you, and please take care of each other.
When the night is wild and new, when the world has come unglued, when I see that naked moon, it's all bright and blue. You're the one I'm thinking of, down below or far above. Soft and still, my love, they're singing, oh, bright and blue. Heard you in the atmosphere, felt you when the words weren't clear. Saw you in the morning air, you're all bright and blue. Bright and blue. Bright and blue. There's some folks who live estranged. There's some things you cannot change. There's some people you must live without. But heaven knows what I would be if you were not here with me. If the road ahead didn't lead me on back to you. We're all bright and blue. Yes, we're all bright and blue. Bright and blue. Bright and blue. see the winds out on the ocean. I feel the waves come crashing in. We sailed along on stormy waters. We sailed along the seas.